12 years. That's how long it's been since my name stopped echoing in their halls. Since my shadow was scrubbed from family photos and my voice deleted from every voicemail box I once filled with affection, plans, and Sunday night check-ins. I wasn't just forgotten, I was erased. It's a strange thing to be made a ghost while you're still alive. But today, I decided to haunt them in person. Camille's invitation wasn't meant for me. It didn't need to be. The moment I saw the headline of the Society column, Delacroix family hosts Golden Anniversary Gala at Willowgate Estate, I knew it was the night. The same estate where I once carved my initials into the oak banister as a joke. The same chandelier that had once witnessed our first kiss, hanging overhead like a relic of a life rewritten without me. I stood across the street from the estate for 5 full minutes before walking in. The night air clung to me, thick with magnolia and tension. In my arms, a small black box, gift-wrapped in matte paper with a silver ribbon. Not flashy, but deliberate. Much like me now. I had chosen the charcoal suit carefully tailored, classic, sharp enough to remind anyone who dared to look too long that I wasn't someone they could dismiss. My hair, once unruly and sun-streaked, was now trimmed and neat, the beard intentional. I didn't need them to remember the man I was. I came to show them the man they tried to erase. The estate's gates creaked open with the same old groan, and I stepped onto the cobblestone path. 2 valet boys stood near the entrance, not even giving me a second glance. Good. I didn't want whispers yet. Not until I was inside. I crossed the threshold like a man returning to a crime scene. The foyer still smelled of lemon polish and money. There were voices, laughter, music, Billie Holiday, maybe. I paused just inside the archway to the grand hall, letting the scene unfold in front of me. Chandeliers bathed the room in gold. Laughter floated through clinking champagne glasses. The Delacroix did love their opulence. Charles and Vivian in the center of it all, their designer smiles and carefully lifted faces aglow in curated joy. Camille wasn't far off, standing by the fireplace like a monarch at court, regal in a silver gown, her hand resting lightly on the arm of a man I didn't recognize yet. I didn't rush. I let myself be forgotten for another minute for old time's sake. My gaze swept the room, catching half-remembered faces. College friends. Distant cousins. Neighbors who once invited me to poker night. None of them looked twice at me. They had no idea who I was. And then a Charles. He turned toward me as if pulled by some unseen force. Our eyes met. For half a second, I braced myself for recognition. For something. But all I got was a nod. Dismissive. Polite. The kind of nod you give a stranger in a nice suit who might be somebody's plus one. I swallowed that like a bitter pill and stepped forward, box underarm, chin high. Let them all wonder. Let the whispers start slowly. I wasn't here to shout. I was here to be undeniable. Halfway through the hall, someone brushed past me, nearly spilling their champagne. They apologized without looking, then did a double take. But by then I was already moving again. Camille's voice, light, lilting, designed to disarm, floated above the chatter. I followed it until I was close enough to see the gold band on her finger. No, the man beside her, tall, broad-shouldered, smug, must have been the new husband. His hand rested possessively on the small of her back, like a flag planted on stolen land. I took one more step. He noticed me first. His brow furrowed. "Can I help you?" he asked, smile polite but tight. I looked past him, straight at her. Camille's laughter froze mid-breath. Her eyes locked onto mine. And in that second, the world forgot how to breathe. She dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the marble. And then, she fell. Not in slow motion. Not with grace. Her knees hit the ground with a crack. A gasp spread through the room like wildfire. Conversations halted. A waiter froze mid-pour. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stood there as Camille stared up at me, wide-eyed and pale, as if she'd seen a ghost. Which, in a way, she had. I hadn't come to disrupt. I hadn't come to beg. I came to be seen. And finally, I was. The room was a fragile thing, still and breathless, as though someone had draped the silence over it like a wet sheet. Camille didn't move. She stayed on her knees, frozen, trembling fingers poised above the glittering shards of her fallen champagne flute. Her expression teetered between disbelief and dread. That same face I once traced with my thumb every morning, now foreign under layers of distance and time. She looked up at me like I was death wearing a memory. I didn't speak. The weight of recognition hadn't landed on the others yet. They were still searching their minds, sifting through old party guests and former colleagues, trying to place the man who had just made their hostess crumble like a rotted beam under too much pressure. That's when her husband, Tate, I assumed, decided to play night. He stepped between us like a security guard rather than a husband, chest puffed, chin slightly raised. I could see in his eyes he wasn't used to being ignored. "You lost?" he asked, his tone light but lined with territorial pride. I smiled faintly, adjusting the box under my arm. "No," I said. "I know exactly where I am." Tate's eyes flicked to Camille, then back to me. "Then maybe you're confused about where you're supposed to be." That made me chuckle, low and dry. "If she tells you who I am," I said, voice low enough to make him lean in, "some people might start running." His smirk faltered. Camille still hadn't moved. She looked like she wanted to speak, but couldn't make her throat obey. I could practically hear the ticking in her head, the mental sprint to catch up to a moment she never expected to happen. Especially not here, not in front of her curated world. She had orchestrated this night like a symphony. Everything about the room screamed old money and polished reputation, glittering gowns, tailored suits, fresh florals and expensive minimalist faces, live jazz trilling from the balcony. But now, the centerpiece was chaos. Tate's jaw clenched. "Who the hell are you?" Before I could answer, a sound sliced through the stillness. Camille's breath sharp, like she'd been punched. She gripped the leg of a nearby chair and slowly pulled herself to standing. Her hands trembled. Her eyes never left mine. She looked at me like she'd just remembered how to breathe and hated what came with it. "Don't," she whispered. Not to Tate. To me. But it was too late for don'ts. 12 years too late. Behind her, I noticed movement. Vivian, Camille's mother, stiff in her navy gown, one manicured hand clutched over her pearl necklace as though it might snap if she let go. Her eyes widened in shock, but still, she said nothing. Charles looked at his daughter, then at me, confusion wrinkling his brow. "Camille? What's going on?" he asked, voice louder than necessary. People were starting to murmur. Still, I didn't rush. I turned slightly, giving the room a better look at my face. A few older guests squinted. One woman placed a hand on her chest as if she was beginning to see the ghost in the suit. No one moved toward me. No one dared. Camille's breath hitched again. "You didn't tell them?" I asked her, softer now. "Not even Charles?" Her mouth opened, then closed. I stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, until I was only a foot away from Tate. He stiffened, but didn't retreat. Not yet. He was still trying to figure out what kind of story he was in. I looked down at the box in my hand, then back at Camille. "Should I give this to him?" I asked, tilting my head toward her husband. "Or would you prefer I let the whole room see what's inside?" Her knees buckled slightly. She reached behind her for the edge of the fireplace, grounding herself. The jazz music sputtered to a halt upstairs. Someone must have told the band to stop playing. Now the silence wasn't empty, it was a fuse. From the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. A woman in a burgundy dress, tall, lean, eyes like a fox. She held her wine glass tighter than necessary, her gaze fixed on me like she was seeing a ghost, but remembering something else too. Daria, Camille's cousin. We'd barely spoken back then, but I remembered her. More importantly, she remembered me. Her expression tightened. She knew. I saw it in the way she shifted her weight, in the tremble that went through her wrist. Daria was there the night it all started unraveling. She was part of the silence, too. I let the quiet stretch a little longer, just long enough for the tension to become unbearable. Then I spoke. 12 years ago, I began, my voice calm and certain. I disappeared. But I never left. The weight of it dropped like a thunderclap in a closed room. Gasps echoed. Camille closed her eyes. Daria lowered her wine. And Tate? He took a small step back, finally realizing he wasn't the one holding power in this conversation. They didn't know what I'd brought with me. Not yet. But they would. And when they did, this house would never be the same. It didn't take long for the weight of my words to ripple across the room. Camille stood motionless, as if moving might crack whatever facade she was desperately clinging to. Her face had drained of color, and her hand, once steady and poised, trembled as she clutched the fireplace mantle like it might anchor her to reality. All eyes had shifted to me, the once-forgotten man now anchoring the room's attention like gravity. And still, no one moved toward me. No one ever moves toward the truth. Charles was the first to speak again. "Camille," he barked, voice gravelly and urgent. "What's going on? Who is this man?" His gaze darted to me, then back to her, as if my presence rewrote the language of the night. But Camille didn't answer. It was Vivian who gasped first, a sharp sound that turned heads. She stepped forward, her fingers white around the stem of her wine glass, staring at me like she was seeing a ghost she'd tried to forget. "No," she whispered, and I caught it, even from across the room. "It can't be." I raised an eyebrow. "It can," I said. "And it is." Somewhere near the back of the room, a chair scraped across the marble as someone stood. The crowd was starting to shift, curiosity battling discomfort. But only one person locked eyes with me and didn't look away, Daria. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. Her gaze was sharp, unrelenting, and threaded with something far more dangerous than fear, memory. I knew in that moment she remembered exactly who I was. And more importantly, she remembered exactly what Camille had done. 12 years ago, Daria was there the night it all crumbled. When the lies began. When my name was stripped from the family, from Camille's lips, from the photo albums on the mantle. She was there when Camille made herself the victim, when she convinced everyone I had walked away from her at the worst time of her life. The cancer scare. The alleged abandonment. The tale of the unworthy husband who couldn't handle adversity. It was all fiction. Beautiful, carefully constructed fiction. And Daria had been silent. Like the rest of them. Until now. Her glass tilted in her hand, just slightly. A tremor. A giveaway. She was weighing something, probably everything. But I saw it, the guilt simmering beneath her surface. The kind that never really goes away. I stepped further into the room, slow and sure. No one stopped me. They parted like water, unsure whether I was a threat or a reckoning. "I was here once," I said quietly, scanning the room. "Not as a guest. As family." A few whispers passed between guests. Names being muttered, fragments of old stories resurrected from the attic of memory. I could hear them straining to recall the scandal, the whispers that followed Camille's swift and silent divorce, the rumor that her husband had simply vanished one night without a word. "I remember you," a man muttered near the back. He was older now, grayer, but the lines of recognition were clear in his face. What was your name again?" I looked straight at Camille as I spoke. "The one you all forgot." That struck. I watched her flinch, watched Charles reel slightly like the floor had just shifted under his expensive shoes. "Enough," Camille snapped suddenly, her voice brittle and sharp. "This isn't the time or place." "No," I said. "It's the perfect time. You just never thought I'd show up to tell the rest of the story." Tate stepped forward again, more unsure now. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but you don't know because you weren't there." I cut in. "You weren't here when she told everyone I left. That I abandoned her when she was sick. That I emptied our savings and ran." Eyes widened. The story was familiar. Everyone had heard it, at some point or another, filtered through Camille's flawless retellings and the family's rehearsed nods. "But I didn't run," I said. "I was pushed." Camille's hands balled into fists at her sides. Her voice dropped an octave. "Why are you doing this?" "Because the silence you gave me didn't kill me," I said. "It sharpened me." Then, as if a dam finally cracked, Daria took a step forward. "I remember," she said, loud enough to turn heads. "I remember everything." Camille whipped around. "Daria." "No," Daria said firmly. "You don't get to shush me anymore." A hush fell again, heavier than the last. "I was there the night she changed the story," Daria said. "I saw the paperwork. I heard the voicemails. I knew the truth. And I stayed quiet because I was afraid." Camille's eyes glistened, but it wasn't remorse. It was fear. "You knew?" Charles asked, aghast. "All this time?" Daria nodded, slowly, swallowing hard. "He didn't leave her. She made sure he was erased. Because the truth didn't fit the image." The words struck the crowd like thunder. Shifting feet, nervous glances. And Camille? She looked like the world had finally caught up to her. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The lie had started unraveling. And I hadn't even opened the box yet. I didn't speak right away. I let the truth hang in the air like a live wire, crackling through the crowd. Let them absorb it, not just the revelation, but the weight of the years it had been buried. Charles stared at Daria like he didn't recognize his own niece. And Camille, she looked like someone trying to hold a door closed against a storm. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't say a word. Not yet. That was the difference between us. She needed lies to speak, but I learned how to weaponize silence. I stepped forward, every eye following me, until I reached the table that held the towering anniversary cake and $1,000 floral centerpiece. I placed the small black box beside it with deliberate care, like a ritual offering. No sudden movements, no raised voice. Just purpose. "You all said I walked out on her," I began, voice steady but loud enough to carry. "That I vanished during her illness, left her to fend for herself. You didn't ask questions. You didn't come looking. You just believed it. I scanned their faces, old friends, former business partners, Camille's sorority sisters, all of them too complicit or too comfortable to challenge her version of events. You called me a coward, a traitor, a disappointment. I turned slowly toward Camille. But the only one who abandoned anything was you. Her lips parted like she might finally defend herself. But I beat her to it. Should I tell them, Camille? I asked. Or should I just play the voicemail? The one you left me the night I found out you were never sick to begin with. Gasps echoed around the room. Vivian staggered slightly, catching herself on the arm of Charles's chair. Her face, always composed, always serene, now cracked in a dozen places. Her pearl necklace trembled at her throat. Camille's hand lifted slightly. Don't. No, I said, louder now. They need to hear it. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small voice recorder. A relic of the past, maybe, but I'd kept everything. Not out of obsession, out of survival. When your name has been smeared like mine was, every receipt becomes sacred. Every word matters. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. I needed an out, okay? I needed you to go so I could move forward. I didn't expect you to disappear so completely, but it worked. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get so big. You were just too boring to deserve my world. There it was. Every syllable like a blade. Camille lunged forward, nearly knocking over the table. Stop it, she shouted, voice shrill with panic. This is insane. But it was already too late. The crowd had heard it. The people she'd convinced, manipulated, charmed into pitying her, they were watching her now with different eyes. Not admiration. Not concern. Disgust. I spent 2 years trying to prove I hadn't stolen from her, I continued. My voice calm despite the fire in my chest. She sent that voicemail the night I confronted her about the diagnosis. Turns out, the lab results she cried over were borrowed from a coworker. Staged. The entire narrative she gave you? Manufactured. Designed to make me vanish cleanly. Tate looked like he'd been punched. He turned to Camille, his face pale, mouth barely moving. You lied about the cancer? Camille didn't answer. Charles finally stood, hands braced on the table, face a mask of disbelief. This isn't possible, he said quietly. I paid for her treatment. I wrote the checks. Which she cashed into a private account, I said, pulling out a second folder from inside my jacket. Along with everything from our joint savings. She told you I drained it. She used it to start her business. You know, the one you always brag about at golf tournaments. Camille backed away slowly, her heel catching on the carpet. She looked like a cornered animal, wounded, desperate. Vivian looked down at her daughter like she was seeing a stranger. You faked cancer? To ruin a man's life? I didn't fake it, Camille snapped, her voice sharp now, mask fully off. I just leaned into the assumption. He was never supposed to come back. But I did, I said. Because I knew one day the lies would catch up to you. I didn't come here for revenge. I came to stop being the villain in a story I didn't write. I opened the box slowly. Inside was a manila envelope, thick with paper. Photocopies of the medical reports. Bank statements. Screenshots of her messages to my former boss. Messages that planted the seeds of theft, incompetence, infidelity. She didn't just remove me from her life. She made sure I had no life left to return to. I rebuilt from nothing, I said, staring at her. I spent years clearing my name. Years wondering if I was the only one who remembered I existed. You didn't just move on, Camille. You made sure I couldn't. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I used to believe closure came from conversation, I said, placing the envelope back in the box. But it doesn't. It comes from clarity. And tonight, everyone here finally has it. I looked around. The silence that followed wasn't confused anymore. It was reckoning. Tate stepped between us like a man waking up in the middle of someone else's nightmare. He shook his head slowly, lips parted in disbelief, glancing down at the documents in the open box like they might vanish if he blinked hard enough. This has to be fake, he said, but even his voice didn't believe it. It doesn't make sense. Camille said she was divorced. She said it was amicable. I reached into the box and pulled out a folded certificate, old, creased, but legally intact. You should read this, Tate, I said, handing it to him. That's our marriage license. And the updated court record showing no finalized divorce. Not because I contested it, but because she never filed. He looked down at it, and I watched the color drain from his face. His eyes jumped from the document to Camille. You said it was all settled. That there was nothing left between you two. That he gestured at me with a trembling hand, was ancient history. Camille opened her mouth, her lips trembling, but nothing came out. Her silence was no longer strategic, it was defensive. The truth had ripped a hole in the reality she'd built, and she was standing at the edge, watching it fall. I'm still her legal husband, Tate, I said calmly. So technically, you're not married. And this, I nodded at the lavish party, the guests, the rented string quartet that had gone mute upstairs. This is all built on a lie. Charles dropped into a chair behind the dessert table like someone had pulled the strings out of him. His hands trembled on his knees. Camille, he whispered, tell me this isn't true. She shook her head, not in denial but in disbelief. Her face was pale, eyes darting from her father to Tate, then to me. I thought I filed, she croaked finally. I thought I did. No, Camille, I said. You hoped I wouldn't check. You hoped I'd stay gone. And when I didn't, you still tried to keep the story together. The problem with lies, I added, is that they age like milk. Tate's jaw clenched. How long did you know? He asked her, eyes full of something that wasn't quite betrayal yet, but close. About all of this? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence screamed for her. Vivian stepped forward, wine glass still in hand though her grip on it was shaky. Her voice was low and cracked. You had the entire family pitying you. We defended you. We distanced ourselves from him. I cut ties with his family. She paused, blinking fast. You told me he left you during chemo. I sent you money every month. I made dinners, held your hand. She trailed off. No one spoke. Tate let the certificate slip from his hand onto the table. He looked at Camille like he didn't recognize her anymore. Did you ever love me? He asked. Camille didn't even flinch. And that was the loudest answer of all. A new wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. Friends exchanged glances. The kind of society people who came for cocktails and jazz were now rooted in place by scandal and disbelief. I watched them, how quickly admiration turned to suspicion. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about them realizing they had celebrated a lie. Charles finally looked at me. Really looked. For the first time that night, he didn't see a stranger. His face changed in real time, shock morphing into guilt, guilt folding into something that looked dangerously close to shame. You were my son, he said softly. I stood at your wedding. I gave a toast. I remember, I said. You called me the son you never had. And then you disappeared without a word when she said I left. He nodded slowly, the weight of 12 years hitting all at once. Camille turned, desperate now. You don't understand it. I do, I cut in. More than you think. I pulled out the final sheet from the envelope. A bank transfer. Date stamped 3 weeks after I left. It showed every cent from our joint account moved into a newly opened business fund under her name. This is how you bought the lease to your bakery, I said. The one you said was funded by your grit and a loan from your parents. I handed the sheet to Charles. He took it with shaking hands, read it, then dropped it like it burned. His face had collapsed inward. A man looking at the ruins of something he thought he'd built strong. I slept in my car for 2 months, I continued, while she bought furniture, branded boxes, signed licensing agreements, told the world I was a ghost. Camille's voice cracked. You were supposed to let it go. That stopped me. I turned back toward her, really facing her now. You don't get to rewrite my life, and then tell me to move on like it never happened. You don't get to wear pearls and play victim while I dig myself out of the grave you buried me in. You had your party, Camille. I brought the truth to dance. Tate walked away. He didn't speak. Didn't look back. Just walked right out the front door. Camille stood alone in the middle of the wreckage she caused. No applause. No champagne. Just silence. And for once, it was hers to carry. Camille's mouth open like she had one final monologue ready, some grand defense that might magically pull the broken pieces of her narrative back together. But all that came out was a breath, a stuttering inhale that died before it reached sound. Her spine straightened as if trying to remember the woman she was 5 minutes ago, composed, celebrated, untouchable. But even in heels and diamonds, she couldn't rise above the truth anymore. Not now. Not in this room. She turned to me, eyes narrowing with what might have once been dignity, but now looked like panic and pearls. I thought I filed, she said again, barely above a whisper, but I caught it. The lie was fraying at the edges. Her voice lacked conviction. The room didn't believe her anymore. You didn't forget, I replied quietly, shaking my head. You didn't file because a clean break would have meant losing control. You didn't want a divorce. You wanted an erasure. So you could rewrite the story without loose ends or contradictions. I wasn't supposed to come back and be anything more than a rumor. She flinched. I turned toward the table where the black box still sat open, the documents inside casting shadows under the soft white lights. The room had gone still again, but not with confusion this time. This was the weight of clarity pressing down on every single person who had once clinked a glass and nodded in agreement when Camille spun her sob story. I could feel their shame like heat on my skin. Slowly, I reached into the box and pulled out one last folder, thicker than the rest. Bound with twine, hand-labeled. The air around us thickened. Camille's eyes locked onto it, and for the first time that evening, true fear etched across her face. This, I said, holding it up for all to see, is the real history. I spent 10 years collecting every receipt, every voicemail, every email, everything she did to make sure I stayed buried. Camille took a step forward. Please. No, I snapped, my voice louder now. The room jolted. You don't get to beg for mercy in front of people you trained to hate me. You don't get to ask for silence when you weaponized it for over a decade. I laid the folder gently on the table. Inside, I continued, are screenshots of Camille's messages to my boss, suggesting I was embezzling company funds, that I was mentally unstable, that I'd been showing signs of paranoia. I met the eyes of an older man across the room, Mr. Winslow, the man who'd fired me 12 years ago. She didn't just ruin our marriage, I said, looking at him. She ruined my career. Mr. Winslow's face paled. He looked down into his glass, the shame visibly clawing at him. And here, I said, pulling another document free and laying it flat, is the timeline of every transfer she made from our shared account into a shell business she created while still married to me. Funds she used to start her company, without a loan, without sweat equity, without honesty. Camille stood frozen, arms limp at her sides, the corners of her eyes glistening. Her mouth twitched, but no words followed. I remember every night I went hungry while she cashed checks. I remember every time I begged a landlord for one more week. I remember rebuilding my resume with a reputation so damaged, I had to use initials instead of my name just to get interviews. The crowd was silent. No one touched their glasses now. No one checked their phones. The chandeliers above hummed faintly, the only sound aside from the occasional shuffle of someone adjusting their stance out of discomfort. I looked down at the last item in the box. An old photo, me and Camille, back when the world was still right side up. I was 27. She had daisies in her hair. We were smiling. Young. Naive. In love. I held it up. This is what you stole, I said. Not money. Not property. My life. Camille moved forward finally. Her steps slow, uncertain. I thought you were gone, she whispered. I didn't know you were still holding on. I let the photo fall back into the box. I wasn't holding on to you. I was holding on to the truth. Because unlike you, I couldn't live without it. Her expression shifted, something crumpling inside her. For a moment, she looked hollow. I thought if I told them everything, they'd hate me, she said. That they'd never forgive me. They probably won't, I replied. But I didn't come here for their forgiveness. I came because I was tired of carrying the blame for your sins. She nodded, once, a shaky, pathetic motion that barely passed for understanding. Then she stepped back, away from the box, away from me. The crowd parted, leaving her isolated in the center of the room, the perfect visual of the truth laid bare. Everything she'd built was now built on broken glass. Vivian sat down beside Charles, her hand gripping his. Daria stood still near the edge of the crowd, her eyes watery, her mouth pressed into a tight, guilty line. Camille looked around the room, then back at me. What happens now? She asked. I stared at her. The woman who once said I was too boring to deserve her world. The woman who destroyed mine and forged a new kingdom out of the rubble. Now, I said. Now, I live. And you deal with the consequences. And with that, I turned away from the wreckage she had dressed up as a legacy. Daria's voice cut through the still air like a trembling blade. He's telling the truth. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Enough to draw every pair of eyes toward her. Enough to shatter whatever illusion Camille might have still clung to in the fading silence. And most of all, it was enough for me. I didn't need a standing ovation, just acknowledgement. A single witness who would no longer lie by omission. Daria stepped forward from the shadows of the room, her heels hesitant on the marble, her expression etched with years of quiet complicity. She looked at me first, eyes full of guilt and something softer, something that almost resembled sorrow. Then she turned to Camille, her cousin, her childhood partner in secrets, and for the first time tonight, she chose the truth over tradition. I was there, she said, louder now, her voice finding strength as it moved. I saw the papers, Camille. The ones you forged. I heard the voicemail you left him. The one you deleted from your phone but forgot was saved to your old cloud account. She took another step forward. You told me he hit you, that he emptied your accounts and threatened your life. I believed you. Camille's body sagged like someone had taken the bones out of her frame. Daria, please. You lied, Daria snapped, and the room recoiled. You looked me in the eye and lied to me, and I defended you. I helped bury him because I thought I was protecting you. Her voice wobbled, but she didn't stop. I stayed silent when he vanished from the family. I stayed silent when you married Tate. I stayed silent when people started asking questions and you fed them carefully rehearsed half-truths. And the whole time, I kept thinking she must have had a reason. She must have been hurt. But you weren't hurt. You were ambitious and selfish. Camille stood frozen, her hands open at her sides like even her body didn't know how to move anymore. Her face had lost its polish, her makeup softening at the corners under the weight of her sweat and tears. She looked small. And I couldn't help but think of the countless nights I imagined this moment. But none of those fantasies felt like this. None of them accounted for the hollowness of vindication. I'm sorry, Daria said, turning to me. Her voice was softer now, directed only at me. I should have spoken up a long time ago. I held her gaze. You're speaking now, I said simply. Behind her, the crowd shifted. The weight of collective shame was spreading. These were people who had celebrated Camille's rise, toasted her courage, reposted her interviews where she spoke about resilience and surviving abandonment. They had bathed in the myth she created because it made for good stories at brunch, at charity fundraisers, at baby showers. But now the curtain had fallen. And what was left on stage wasn't strength. It was theft. Camille looked around like she was searching for an exit that didn't exist. The pillars of her carefully curated image were crumbling in real time, and she didn't know where to stand anymore. You didn't just erase him, Daria said, quieter now. You built a new life on his grave. That sentence, it hit like a funeral bell. Someone near the buffet coughed uncomfortably. Another guest quietly slipped toward the side door, murmuring something about getting air, though we all knew what it meant. They'd come for the glitter and gossip, not for the reckoning. I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the weight of it all. For years, I had wandered the world like a man with no name. I'd taken jobs beneath my skill level, accepted handshakes laced with suspicion, eaten alone more nights than I cared to count, all because of a narrative that began in this very room. And now, that narrative was ash. Camille turned to me one final time, her lips parting like she wanted to spin a new version, some softer rewrite of her motives, her choices. But then her gaze flicked to the box on the table, to the folders still spread open, to Daria's trembling shoulders, and she seemed to understand that no story she told now would land. You don't know what it was like, she said quietly, voice raw. The pressure. The expectations. You were always so decent, so stable. And I was terrified I'd never become anything, that I'd never be enough. I didn't flinch. Then you should have left, I said. With honesty. You should have told the truth and walked away. But you didn't. You chose destruction. You chose to ruin me to rise higher. And now you get to stand in what you built. A long silence stretched between us. But for once, she didn't try to fill it. I nodded toward Daria. Thank you, I said, and meant it. She nodded back, tearfully, then stepped aside. Camille lowered her eyes, and for the first time since I walked through that door, she looked like she finally understood what she had done, not just to me, but to everyone in that room. To herself. The lie was dead. And the truth had a pulse again. Charles Delacroix wasn't a man used to being silent. He was the type who filled rooms with opinions and firm handshakes, a patriarch who commanded attention without ever raising his voice. But now he stood trembling, the skin around his eyes tighter than before, his hand gripping the edge of the table beside the anniversary cake as if the truth might knock him to the floor. Slowly, like an old man waking from a long, indulgent dream, he stepped toward the box I'd placed. His eyes passed over the documents, the voice recorder, the photo of a younger, happier version of me. But what he finally picked up was the folder, the one with the financial records. He opened it like it might explode. One page, then another, then another. The deeper he read, the more his expression twisted, not in anger at me, but at something closer to disbelief and betrayal. You mean to tell me? His voice cracked like he couldn't believe he was saying the words aloud. The trust fund? The startup money? The Delacroix Foundation grant? None of that was hers. Camille didn't speak. She didn't even raise her head. Camille, he said again, firmer now. Answer me. She stayed still, back to him, like if she didn't look into his eyes, it wouldn't be real. But silence had lost all its magic. Tell me it's not true, he said. Tell me I didn't shake hands with executives and donors, praising your rise while you climbed on a man's life you buried like a secret. Still nothing. Vivian's voice cut through. Charles. But he raised a hand. Don't, he said sharply. Let her speak. Camille turned around slowly. Her eyes glistened, mascara clinging to the corners, but there was no performance left. No armor. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she said, her voice like torn paper. I wanted to make something of myself. And so you destroyed someone else to do it? Charles snapped, stepping closer. You looked us in the eye for 12 years. 12 years, Camille. And you let us believe a lie. You let us abandon a man who stood by you when you had nothing. And for what? A business? Applause? Her chin quivered. It wasn't just about that. No, I interrupted, voice low but cutting. It was about survival, wasn't it? She looked at me, and for once, I didn't see malice or manipulation. I saw what remained after everything else had collapsed. Shame. You want to know what survival looks like? I stepped forward, slowly. It's sleeping on a park bench with a wedding band still on your finger. It's watching your name dragged through court documents while you clean restaurant kitchens under an alias. Survival is sending money from part-time jobs to a woman who told the world you were violent and unstable, just so you'd believe there was still good in her. Tate was gone. Long gone. He hadn't said a word when he left. Just walked out the front door like he'd opened it into another world. One without Camille. I turned back to Charles. You asked if it was true. All of it. And the answer is yes. She forged that world like an artist. But she didn't do it alone. You all helped paint the picture. You didn't just believe her. You protected her version like gospel. Charles's shoulders slumped like a man absorbing the full weight of his role. He looked at Camille again, but there was no warmth left in his expression. Just ruin. Do you even know who you are anymore? He asked her. Camille didn't respond. Not because she refused, but because I think, deep down, she didn't know. I turned back to the guests, those who remained. Some were already leaving. Others lingered out of obligation, discomfort etched deep into their eyes. The same people who had nodded and clapped for Camille's speeches about overcoming abandonment were now wide-eyed, exposed by the truth they had ignored. You all raised glasses to her success, I said. But you never asked where it came from. You never wondered why I disappeared. Because it was easier to believe I was a monster than admit you'd all been fooled. A beat passed. I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I continued. I didn't come to burn this place down. But I've been living in its ashes for 12 years. So tonight, I brought them home. Camille turned toward her mother. Vivian still seated, stiff, as though trying to disappear into the upholstery of her chair. Mom, she whispered, barely audible. I didn't mean. But Vivian didn't offer her a hand. She turned her head away, slow and deliberate. I believed you, she said coldly. I told your story like it was truth. And now I don't know how many people I hurt because of it. Camille's body sagged again. She was alone now. Really, truly alone. 12 years ago, I was cast out from this family like a stain they couldn't wash away. Now, I had returned not to reclaim a place, but to show them who I had become in their absence. Camille had rewritten history. I'd just brought back the original manuscript, and they finally read it. I didn't need to gloat. There was no satisfaction in watching Camille fall apart. No pleasure in seeing her silenced, her carefully sculpted world crack under the weight of truth. I'd dreamt of this night 1,000 different ways. Imagined triumphant speeches. Imagined her on her knees begging for forgiveness. Imagined vindication wrapped in thunderous applause. But now, standing in the same room where I'd once been celebrated and then erased, all I felt was done. Not victorious. Not even angry. Just done. I looked at Camille one last time. She wasn't crying. Her face was frozen in the kind of stunned stillness that follows a storm. Around her, the crowd had thinned. People were excusing themselves under the pretense of bathroom breaks, phone calls, urgent appointments. But I knew better. The truth was an uncomfortable companion. Most people preferred the lie. Charles still stood there, his mouth slightly open, shoulders squared like he wanted to take back time and start again. Vivian wouldn't look at anyone. She stared at the floor, her hand on her glass, though she hadn't taken a sip in over 20 minutes. And Daria, still near the edge of the chaos, stood like a sentinel, too shaken to move but unwilling to retreat. I turned toward Camille. I didn't come here to hurt you, I said, and the weight of that truth landed on me as I spoke it aloud. You might think I planned all this to destroy you, but I didn't. I came so you'd finally face what you've done, and so I could finally let go of it." Her eyes flickered, just briefly, and something in her face twitched, like she almost believed me. I reached into the box and pulled out an envelope, thicker than the others, sealed and stamped. My final gift. I walked to the table and slid it across to Charles, who hesitated before picking it up. "What is this?" he asked. "A certified withdrawal," I said, "from every lawsuit I could have filed. Defamation, financial damages, breach of trust. All of it. It's signed, notarized, and complete." He blinked. "You're not pressing charges?" I shook my head. "I don't need to." Camille took a step forward. "Why?" Her voice was hoarse now. "Hollow. After everything, why not bury me?" I looked her in the eye and said, without anger, "Because I don't need you to fall anymore. I just needed to stop carrying the weight you left behind." And it was true. For so long, I thought closure would come when she paid, when the world saw her for what she was. But now that it had happened, now that the curtain had dropped, I realized I didn't need her to be punished. I just needed to stop shrinking myself to fit the narrative she built. "I'm not staying," I said. "I'm not here to fix anything. This isn't an invitation to reconnect or rebuild. I just needed to return, one last time, to say what I was never given the space to say." Vivian's voice was soft behind me. "What happens now?" I turned toward her, toward Charles, toward all of them. "Now," I said. "Now I leave." I reached down and closed the box, gathering the folder, the certificate, the recordings. But I left the photo behind, the one of us in younger years. That moment, that illusion, didn't belong to me anymore. It never had. I picked up my coat, then turned back toward the hall. No one followed. Camille didn't cry out. Charles didn't call my name. Daria didn't ask me to wait. They all just watched as I walked away from the legacy I once helped build and was buried under. My shoes echoed against the marble. I passed the same entryway I had walked through earlier in silence, unnoticed. But now, every eye left in the room watched me go. Not because they admired me, not because they pitied me, because they saw me. And that was all I ever really wanted. I stepped outside into the cool night air. The porch light flickered above me. A breeze passed through the hedges, rustling leaves in a soft whisper. I paused for just a moment, glancing back, not out of regret, but acknowledgement. 12 years ago, I left through this same door under a cloud of lies. Tonight, I walked out in the truth. I descended the steps, each one lighter than the last. The box tucked under my arm, the silence now mine, not something given, but something earned. For years, I had been the ghost haunting Camille's perfect world, the missing piece everyone refused to talk about. But ghosts fade when you face them. And tonight, I had faced them all. I reached the curb and unlocked my car, slid into the driver's seat, rested the box on the passenger's side. The engine turned over smooth and soft. I sat there for a second, watching the house shrink in the rearview mirror. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. And that was worth more than any apology they could have offered. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at my studio, handwritten, no return address, sealed with a pale pink wax stamp I remembered too well. Camille always did have a flair for the dramatic. I stared at the envelope for a full 5 minutes before opening it. No rush. The damage was done. The words couldn't wound me anymore, not now, not with truth on my side. Inside was a single page. No stationery, no perfumed paper, no neat formatting. Just her handwriting, uneven, rushed in places, like her thoughts outran the pen. "I don't know where to start," it began. Classic. She went on, line after line, pouring half apologies and fragmented confessions onto the page. She admitted that some of the things I said were true. Not all, of course. Camille couldn't give full ground even when the battlefield was empty. She wrote about pressure, about legacy, about how being a Delacroix came with invisible chains. She said she never thought I'd come back, never imagined I'd still care. But most of all, she wrote that she didn't realize how much of herself she'd buried alongside me. She didn't ask for forgiveness, but she also didn't deny what she'd done. I folded the letter carefully and stepped outside into the crisp morning air. In the alley behind my studio, I pulled the lid off a steel bin, struck a match, and dropped the letter inside. Flames licked the corners, curling the paper into ash. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just watched it burn. Not out of spite. Out of release. Because there are some things in life you don't archive, you let them turn to smoke. I walked back inside, locking the door behind me. My studio smelled like pine wood and varnish, brushes still soaking in the jar by the window. A canvas waited, half-finished, the light filtering through the glass onto its blank side. It had been weeks since I touched it. I'd been preparing for that night at the Delacroix estate for so long, I'd forgotten what my hands were capable of when they weren't clenched around history. But now there was space. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black and hot, and settled into the quiet. No phone calls, no emergency meetings, no press releases from Camille's PR team trying to reframe the fallout. Just stillness. And in that stillness, something new grew. The Donovan Foundation started with an idea scratched on a napkin during one of those lonely, rebuilding years. I'd been sleeping in the backseat of my car, eating off gas station shelves, applying to 20 jobs a day with a name that carried more baggage than a lost airport terminal. And in that darkness, I thought, what if someone had been there for me? Not to fix everything, just to believe me, just once. Now, that idea had a name, a purpose. The Donovan Foundation for Displaced Innovators. Not a charity, a second chance. The first recipient was a 19-year-old girl named Aria. A coder. Brilliant. Fierce. Her parents disowned her when she refused to give up her app idea and marry into the family business. She was living out of a friend's garage, teaching kids how to program on borrowed equipment. When I read her story, I saw myself. Not just the ambition, the exile. We funded her prototype, gave her workspace, connected her with a mentor. And when she sent her first thank you email, all she wrote was, "You made me feel seen." That was it. I didn't need Camille to fall on her knees. I didn't need Charles or Vivian to go public with their regret. And I sure as hell didn't need Tate to call and confess his embarrassment. Justice doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes, it's quiet. Sometimes, it looks like a burnt letter and a girl with a dream. I stood at the easel, paintbrush in hand, and looked at the canvas again. Then I dipped the bristles in cobalt blue, the color of rebirth, and made my first stroke in months. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just color. Just movement. Freedom. Because healing doesn't come from making others bleed. It comes from rising while they remain where they left you. I wasn't the ghost anymore. I wasn't the forgotten. I was the author now. And my next chapter was just beginning.